I was just going to say, makes me think a lot of like what the U.S. did in a bunch of the Eastern European countries that are tied to, that had that, what, 17+1?
Yes.
The whole the multilateral, bilateral thing China was doing with Eastern European countries. And it began the Trump administration. I think the Biden administration kind of carried on, but like just doing very little, just kind of opening up.
Trump meeting with, was it the Romanian president or somebody? There was some...
And it wasn't just the meeting. It was also just like opening up economic dialogue. And that completely shattered, didn't completely shatter, but it really hurt China's grasp on the region. I mean, what did Lithuania just do with Taiwan?
Taiwan is opening a representative office in Lithuania.
Yeah, like that's crazy. And it was just a little bit that the Western world had to do. So it sounds like the same thing is in the Pacific as well. It just doesn't take much.
China's been very good at lighting fires on our turf, causing problems for us. And, it's not hard to light fires on their turf. Everybody can open up a Taiwanese office. Everybody can, get rid of the Confucius Institutes and bring in Taiwanese language teachers. Talk more about Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong, so there's so many things that can be done. Support a guy like Daniel Soudani. That's a problem for Beijing. That's a big problem for Beijing. It's not only the right thing to do, it gives it strategic leverage, right? So right now, it's actually relatively low cost to fight on the political warfare battleground, right? They're winning on the political warfare battleground, but fighting back is not very high cost. It takes a little bit of thought and a bunch of political will. And we lose on political warfare battleground, we are going to go to the kinetic battleground, and that's going to be very high cost.
And that's where lives will be lost, yeah.
How do you think we increase the political will?
So this is all sorts of stuff they were talking about before. And I mean, the reason I was a little bit unclear about my support for this statement that, the people don't know. I mean, American people know. The American people, if you go to Amazon, and you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see over and over, is this made in China? Is this made in China? Because people understand that China's strategic weight comes in large part from its economic weight, which comes in large part from us, right? And they don't want to feed that machine. They would prefer to pay 10 cents or $1 more or whatever to buy something. And it may not even be that much more at this point. So getting things like, a place where you can buy stuff where it's not made in China. Just little things. And there's congressional legislation to try to get online retailers to list country of origin. That is being fought by Amazon and others. And so, call your congressman or woman and kind of make a statement that this is important to you. So there's the people know the connection into the political system, because there's so much money from Chinese political warfare agents, is quite strong. But people need to be reelected. So if this becomes a political issue, if you talk to your politicians, your media, if you are aware of how much Chinese political warfare is affecting your daily life, that mask you're wearing, what you're seeing on your social media feed, what you can or can't say on YouTube, then, you can push decision-making in that direction and give the courage to those who need the political will to stand up for this sort of stuff.
Even all the sister city things happening in the U.S.
Yeah, it's got to stop. I mean, who wants to be a sister city with like a genocidal center? Like my sister city.
Mayor of San Francisco.
My sister city is Urumqi.
But that's another thing is, there's discussions about not buying stuff from Xinjiang, okay, because it's, genocide, But that's like saying we're not going to buy it from Dachau, but we'll buy it from Berlin. Like it's all part of the same system.
Oh, yeah. And plus they're already, like sending Uyghurs to work all over China. So plus there's already also prison labor and slave labor from a lot of other non-Uyghurs in China. So it's not...
We need to decouple from China.
We need to, and this is where words are important, deparasite.
Ooh.
Yeah, because it's not a coupling. A couple is like two equal people coming together in a partnership, blah, blah, blah. The Chinese economy is fundamentally parasitic. So it comes in, it sucks out your capital, it sucks out your intellectual property, it sucks out your resources to bring it back to its own state and grow its own state and leave you weakened and defenseless.
So the Chinese Communist Party is like a tick. And if you don't get it early, it'll bury its head in you. And then it's much more difficult to remove without getting Lyme disease.
There is another parasite. I wrote an article about it, and I've got like a terrible memory, so I can't remember what the parasite was, but it's like this incredible parasite that like goes in to make you infertile and like take over your whole system and controls you like a zombie.
Oh, like a cordyceps
Sure.
fungus. It's where it's like it's on ants or other insects, and like it infects and then takes over your brain.
Yes, I'd go more with the zombie analogy than the tick analogy.
Well,
Oh wow, that's great. Well,
zombie fungus.
So de-zombie from the Chinese economy is more what you're going at. The decoupling.
But so what you're saying is World War Z, the book, is actually based on, it's like a prediction.
It's an economic book. Yeah. Yeah, it's a
That's
book.
what Brad Pitt was trying to tell us about all along.
That's right.
Before they took the source of the infection away from China in the movie.
And the other thing is, I mean, this again is something Carrie Gershanik, who's been on your show, has talked about, is the correct use of language. Like organ harvesting, it's not harvesting. Like it's, this is not the right term to
Organ
use.
pillaging.
It's the forcible removal of organs for profit from living human beings.
How about just killing people for organs?
Yeah. Well, for profit.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the element of it.
For fun and profit.
Yeah, it's looking at people as spare parts. We allow this kind of language to obfuscate the horror of this situation, and that reduces political will. So part of the kind of the pushback against political warfare is accurate use of language on these issues.
So instead of involuntary prison labor, we just call it slave labor.
It is.
Well, we do that.
Well, yeah, but I mean for everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like the idea. No more organ harvesting.
No, harvesting it's just not right. That's
Yeah.
just not. I don't know how that happened. I don't know how that terminology ever came into play. Actually.
Harvesting. Yeah.
I think probably it seems like organ harvesting itself was like, I think what activists try to do is say it was forced organ harvesting or something like that.
Yeah.
Like
the key is that it's not harvesting. It's
Yeah, and
forced.
harvesting implies it's going to grow back.
Right.
Like there'll be another crop next year of livers.
Yeah, I know that some
Well,
tried to
in
start
China, there
using-
is always another crop next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Because when they were done killing Falun Gong for their organs, they went to Xinjiang and started doing it with the Uyghurs, right?
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think
But surely they'll stop there.
well, yeah. I mean, this is the thing, and understand that if they will do this, if the system has rationalized doing this to their own citizens, they will do this and more to everybody else. That's why there's no compunction about letting a Daniel Sudani die if he's inconvenient. It's not, this doesn't stay within the borders. This is a fundamentally expansionist policy, right? So this is why the Indians know it's not going to stop with a few border posts in Ladakh. Like the goal is, you get to a position of comprehensive national power, number one, which includes strategic hegemony and economic hegemony and political hegemony and psychological. I mean, all of the unrestricted warfare elements, including those three warfares, are to that end. So we have a choice, do we fight it now on the political warfare front where it's relatively low cost? It is some cost, but it's relatively low cost. Or do we wait as the zombie grows and expands its army, and then it's those World War II maps come to life again?
Yeah, what I find with trying to tell people about the threat of the Chinese Communist Party is it sounds too extreme for people. It sounds
Too bad to be true.
like, yeah, or it sounds like, oh, well, this is a lot of things people have with like, oh, well, like the Western countries were imperialist or colonial and China is not a colonial power or imperialist power,
Do you think this is still as much of a problem after the coronavirus? I mean, I feel like talking about...
Yes, it's still a problem.
I think
Chris.
it's still a problem. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's still a problem.
Yeah, I flew up here and I was sitting next to somebody from El Salvador. They were like, yeah, U.S. wasn't great to us. Like, correct, but that doesn't mean that's okay for other countries to be not great. And in the meantime, you have options now that people in China don't have. And if you want to see what it will be like, look at Hong Kong.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to look. There's a kind of the abstract argument, which, yeah, it's hard to get. It's hard for people to understand how different other people can be. I mean, it's a problem in relationships. Like, you know, you can have somebody who's dating somebody who really sucks, and you're like, they're not going to change. I'm like, oh no, they'll change. You know, we'll just sign this climate change policy, and they'll be fine. We'll get along. We'll cooperate well. You know, but
we're in an abusive relationship with China.
Yeah, you are in an abusive relationship with China, and a parasitic zombie-like abusive relationship.
Now, you've been saying we for most of this podcast, but that part you said you are in an abusive relationship.
Well, because they've already got us.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're done. But yeah, so using this kind of accurate terminology can help. And when you're having these discussions with people and they say, well, it's not as bad, and then you say, well, explain Hong Kong to me. You know, explain why Tibetan monks are lighting themselves on fire. You know, explain what's happening and why two very different administrations say this is a genocide. So we don't want to see it, but one way of dealing with that, again, this pushback on the political warfare, is accurate terminology based on specific examples. Truth is on our side. The most important thing. It really is. And that's the thing. We can't question our own values. We can't think they're just slogans and they're not real guideposts.
That ties into a whole big slew of things in issues in the United States about, you know, what is the U.S. founded on?
So that's definitely your problem.
Yeah.
That's a you, not a we.
Well, it'll become everyone's problem very soon. But
I would also say, I mean, as an outsider who's been stranded in this country because of coronavirus for the past year, I've learned a lot about the U.S. over the past year and about U.S. exceptionalism. And it actually really is exceptional. I mean,
tell me more.
Well, it's a country that was founded by people that not only didn't trust each other, but didn't trust the government. Right?
Yeah.
So the founding documents are they're deliberately defensive of individual liberties in a way that no other country is. And with an understanding of both how government can go off the rails and how the mob can go off the rails, right? So it is, I mean, sometimes, you know, people will ask, you know, I'll talk about China's grand strategy and they'll say, oh, well, what is the U.S. grand strategy? There isn't so much a grand strategy, but there is a roadmap towards a more perfect union, right? And yeah, it's very imperfect, and it's, you know, gotten better. And I would argue that, you know, this period in history is better than it was 50 years ago, which is better than it was 50 years ago, which is better than it was 50 years ago, which is better than it was 50 years ago, which is really all you can ask for from a society, that there is a striving towards this more perfect union. And the relationship between the states, and the federal government is something also I didn't really understand until this last year, which is another interesting check on power, on this balance of power. So there are mechanisms built into the system that are unique and that are worth understanding better. It's not a perfect country. There are no perfect countries because there are no perfect people, and people are what makes up a country. I mean, this is also in the founding documents, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, like, you know, when the founding fathers were making these documents, like, they must have also been looking at each other and themselves and like, I don't trust you.
Yeah.
I don't trust myself.
Yeah. And that's correct. That's the right thing to do. That's why it can survive. So I think that, you know, there is a need to understand the things that make this country, your country, exceptional, and why they should be fought for and defended, and why there isn't this false equivalency. You know, there is a mechanism built into the foundation of this country that allows it to improve. The foundation of the Chinese Communist Party only allows it to be more authoritarian and communist and controlling and that stuff. That the trajectory is not the same.
It's founded on blood.
And yeah, and it's founded on lies about how human beings behave and what
that's
the relationship.
communism. That's Marxism. Yeah.
Yeah. So trust yourself, be yourself, and support the people around the world who believe the same thing and want the same thing. That's it.
Yeah, I guess until like the U.S. gets its own like culture wars or whatever.
Oh, I mean, I don't know if we're ever going to be absolutely done with.
Yeah,
You
but as long as we are so busy, like, you know, what you said about, hey, the country's getting better, there's a whole argument about that not being the case, which is absurd. And if we can't even get our own heads screwed on straight, how is there ever going to be political will to challenge the Chinese Communist Party until it's too late?
I mean, that could be kind of a chicken and egg situation.
But we also don't necessarily have to deal with it because, like, you know, the founding fathers came together despite major policy differences and decided that, like, okay, the priority is independence from England, and we're going to at least come together to fight that. And then they dealt with other issues.
I mean, yeah,
as they went on,
they kind of hated each other.
Yeah, I mean, like slavery obviously is the biggest elephant in the room there, but there were many other issues that they couldn't agree on. But at least they're like, in this issue, we must hang together, otherwise we shall hang separately. That sort of idea. So at least when, irrespective of all the chaos going on in the U.S. right now, like, we can still come together on China issues and stand up to the CCP together. And I do believe that we can do that if we try.
I'm not that optimistic about that. I think what you're talking about, if we don't fix the culture wars happening in this country, we'll just be at each other's throats until it becomes a kinetic war, and then we are all forced to realize, oh, that's the bigger threat.
So I don't think they're disaggregated. So I think that there's a very big external impetus to exacerbate your culture wars, right? I think there are hundreds of thousands of Chinese PLA people sitting on their computers trying to figure out how to use...
It's an obvious strategic advantage for them.
Well, so you're saying that the Chinese People's Liberation Army is making our cultural and societal tensions in the U.S. worse as part of their strategy.
We already have proof that Russia did it.
They've been doing this for... I mean, in the early 70s, Mao invited Black Panther leaders over to China. And
right.
And the Black Panthers were, I mean, and this is the thing. It's a response to a legitimate problem, but it's not a legitimate solution, right? The problem is real, but Maoism isn't the solution, right? So unless you do have to address the legitimate problem, but with a solution that isn't China. And that's or appeasing China or giving it to China, whatever. So they've got half of it, but the other half, they can't deliver that solution. I mean, if the Black Panthers had actually gotten their way and what they wanted, they wouldn't have been creating a society that was more equitable for their people, for the people who they said they were representing. But that's just about how long China has been injecting itself into creating that sort. They weren't reaching out to peaceful bridge building organizations. They were reaching out to more divisive organizations, and very overtly. I mean, there's that acupuncture clinic in the South Bronx in the early 70s that was run by the Black Panthers and the Young Lords, and they called themselves Barefoot Doctors, and they had posters of Mao on the wall. So, and some of them went for training in China, and as they were doing acupuncture, they were doing political education. So it's been a component of Chinese political warfare against every country that it sees as a threat, including the U.S., for decades and decades and decades.
Yeah, I mean, if people in the U.S. are under the notion that the U.S. is the most evil country in the world, then why fight the Chinese Communist Party? It won't happen.
Yeah, and they don't even think about it. And that's the point, is you don't even think about China. And this is why, so the people in the Indian strategic community think it's very likely that you'll see an increase in terrorist activity. Because if you're...
Terrorist activity where?
Against the U.S. and against Europe. Mm-hmm. Because if the security establishment is distracted by the terrorist threat, then there's less attention paid to China. And China uses proxies. And this is the China-Pakistan relationship, right? So, I mean, and others, but India knows it through the China-Pakistan relationship. So the Pakistan attacks, some of them backed on India, seem to have Chinese logistical support, if not more. So that's why you end up with huge vulnerabilities across the board. And this is what political warfare is, right? It's everything short of old school, we line up with guns and you line up with guns. And if you have a vulnerability, if you have a social vulnerability, if you have an economic vulnerability, if you have a political vulnerability, the Chinese Communist Party will identify it and try to make it bigger and more destructive.
Mm-hmm. So are we ending on a message of hope?
Yeah.
I feel we were almost there at one point.
Yeah. I mean, the hope is we're right. Our systems are better.
Yeah.
I like that. And for me, I'm always right, even when I'm wrong.
I don't agree.
I do, as a Canadian. I do. Yes, you're right. No.
I think that is important to remember. Yeah, it's just this, freedom and democracy is superior to Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, socialism with Chinese characteristics.
I don't know why that's complicated.
It shouldn't be.
No. And if you believe it, you should be ready to stand up for it and fight for it, whether it's in the Solomon Islands or in your city council.
And ideally at a time when fighting for it involves, hey, let's build an airport here instead of let's send troops here.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah, like you said, it's what matters is truth.